Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner, where each month we bring you a new fly pattern to give a try to on our Central Oregon lakes and rivers. In addition to showing you how to tie each pattern, I'll feature fishing technique tips and tricks, and I'll cover some of the entomology behind each pattern to help gain a better understanding of the bugs that we're trying to imitate. I have field tested each of the patterns that I feature each month to make sure that they catch fish. I'll cover tying instructions for the fly as well as materials to help you be able to recreate these patterns on your own vise. For this month's pattern, I'm tying a Two-Tone Flashback Copper John. This is one I've experimented with over time and finally an adaptation I really like for a number of situations. I was particularly looking for a fly that I could use in still waters to help imitate calabatus. But also this one works well in streams to imitate those small nondescript mayfly nymphs or other. As you may know, the Copper John was designed by John Barr, and it is an excellent pattern and has been widely used throughout many fisheries in the world. I use it here on still waters quite frequently. In the early season up at East Lake, I'll use a red Copper John. I don't know if this imitates chironomids or mayfly nymphs or exactly what, but it's a very effective pattern. During mid-season, during calabatus season, I'll use this to strip under an intermediate sink, or I might even hang it from an indicator. I can tie this very same pattern on a jig hook and suspend it so it's lying a little more flat in the water. But an excellent pattern. It's tied two-tone, so we give a little variation in the abdomen of the pattern. And I've tied this with a flashback a little more substantial than the original. So I hope you'll give this one a try. It is a good pattern. The materials list for this pattern is on the screen, but I'll cover each material in a little greater detail as we tie the fly. So let me begin by introducing the first three materials. For a hook, I'm using a Firehole 718 size 16. This is a curved shank competition barbless hook that's 2x long and a medium wire that works well for a Copper John. For the bead, I'm using a 2.7 millimeter or 7/64 brass bead. I want this fly to go down, and you can use tungsten, but where I'm fishing with it in lakes, I don't want it to go down too quickly, as that's somewhat unnatural. For the thread, I'm using an Ultra Thread 140 denier, and this is in olive to be as close as I can to the color of the peacock up at the head of the fly. I'm going to begin by tying on my thread right behind the bead to cinch it up tight to the eye, and then I'll wind all the way back to the tail set position, and this is where I'll get ready to tie on my biots for the tail. For the tail, I'm using a Canada Goose wing feather, and I'm using a biot off the leading edge, or two biots off the leading edge, and this feather I have dyed black. So I've selected out two barbs off the leading edge of a Canada Goose wing feather, and I'm going to go ahead and pinch those down right at the tail set position and put a wrap of thread right over the barb, and then I'll wind that up to the bead to cover up the butts. So next I'm going to go ahead and wrap some wraps of thread around the abdomen thorax area to create a very slight taper on this. I don't want a huge taper, but I'm going to create a taper on this body before I tie in my wire. For the abdomen on this pattern, I'm using two colors of wire. I have copper and bronze, and this wire thickness is in fine. So next I'll go ahead and tie in my two strands of copper and bronze wire, and I'll immediately start winding this in consecutive wraps all the way up to right next to the bead, and we'll tie that off and clip off the excess. For the flashback over the thorax on this pattern, I'm using Mirage tinsel in medium opal. For the wing case, I'm using a turkey tail feather, and I've taken just a clip off the tip of the feather. There's kind of a bronzy colored area that helps give me a flashback color using natural materials. This is different than the original pattern, but it's one adaptation I like an awful lot for this fly. So next I'm going to tie in my wing case sections, and I'll tie in the Mirage tinsel first, and then I'll tie in the turkey tail second, and that's in the opposite way of the way it will lay on the hook. For the thorax, I'm using a couple of barbs off a peacock tail feather. So let me tie in the two barbs of peacock, and I'll go ahead and wind those through the thorax area and up to the head and tie that off and clip off the excess. For the legs on this pattern, I'm using a Brahma hen saddle, and I'm clipping out one feather and then I'm creating a V with it. You'll see that in the video. This is in a dyed natural brown, and this is being used for the legs on this pattern. So I've taken a feather off my Brahma saddle, and I've clipped the center stem and basically pulled some barbs back to create a nice big V containing right about the right number of barbs for the legs on either side of this fly. And I'll go ahead and tie that in right at the head position and somewhat cocked downward to be able to form the legs on this pattern. So now let me take the turkey that I reserved earlier, and I'll fold it over the thorax area to create the wing case and tie that off and clip off the excess. And then I'll follow that up pretty quickly with folding the Mirage tinsel over the top of the turkey and create the overall flashback thorax on this pattern. And then I'll drop into a whip finish. And go ahead and clip off that excess Mirage. And I'll roll this over in the vise so you can see the top of the fly. We're going to coat this with UV resin in just a moment. I'm using Solaris Bone Dry, which is a fairly thin compound, and so I'm going to put 2 coats on this wing case. So I'll coat one and then partially cure it, and then I'll go ahead and coat it a second time and cure it more thoroughly. So let me finish up by rotating the vise a couple of times so you can see all sides of the Two-Tone Copper John Flashback Nymph. So that has been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. I hope you'll give the Two-Tone Flashback Copper John a try. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this YouTube page and visit us on Facebook at Sunriver Anglers. Thanks for watching.